1, 2, 3, funky.
Just throwing out bloody coats on the floor and plaster.
No, I didn't touch any coats. They must have been there a minute ago because you've just found them. But they weren't there 2 minutes ago.
They weren't there 5 minutes ago.
They weren't there 2 minutes ago.
No, you haven't gone there.
Got it zoomed right in as well.
No spots.
Excuse me. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video. God, that's blinding. So why a Honda Civic, and why have I chosen a Honda Civic over the masses of cars that are available in a similar category? You know, a nice, small sports car, you know, which the Civic VTI was in its day. You know, with 160 horsepower and weighing just over a ton, it's nothing to be sniffed at even by today's standards. But why did I buy this when I could have bought something more modern, cheaper, more fun perhaps? Maybe even more easily modifiable and easier to get power out of. And would that make it more fun? Would that make it better for me if it was more powerful? Would it make it better for me if it looked better? Would it suit my taste if I'd have bought something else even outside of this price bracket? And when I sort of ask myself that question, I do think, well, no, because I bought this car for a reason. And I think I buy Honda Civics for the same reason a lot of other people do. But I'm going to break it down now into like the sort of criteria that I looked at when I was looking to buy a car, and why I've ended up buying 3 Honda Civics. So number one, it would have to be that it's the nostalgia of the car. And I think a lot of people buy Honda Civics because of the nostalgia. We saw them on video games, we saw them on films. They were the most popular car in the first Fast and Furious. If you don't believe me, then go watch the film. There are Honda Civics everywhere in the first Fast and Furious. They're just none of the hero cars. You've then got the fact that we all grew up around the era of these being the #1 sort of tuner car in America, and that's where the mass aftermarket support of these particular cars came from. That and Japan, you know, and these were well known in both the USA and Japan for being a go-to tuner car. Kanjo racers, for example, they've used them since the really early 90s, perhaps even the late 80s with like the EF Honda Civics and you know, EF chassis CRXs. But you know, with all that comes a really big sort of nostalgia to me, specifically when I'm looking at Honda Civics, when I was looking at buying a car. And I always wanted this particular car. I always wanted this car because of Need for Speed Underground. I always said when I was looking at buying a car that I wanted a Honda Civic Coupe. That was going to be my first car. Turned out it wasn't my first car, and we're a long way down the road now as far as first cars go for me. But this car to me is all that nostalgia. And I think a lot of that nostalgia and a lot of its popularity comes from it being over-engineered. So that brings me on to point 2. It's not just the nostalgia of the car, they're also very much over-engineered. Honda's engines rev to oblivion if you get the right engine. You know, the performance engines from Honda, naturally aspirated, high revving engines, because they came from building motorbikes. You can get a lot of power out of these little VTEC engines. You know, the 2-litre K-series engine's a perfect example. Tuning Fork, aka Scotty, as is known from Haltech, he did a brilliant video and explained the build of the K20 engine and how Honda puts engines together far better than what I could in this particular video, as he had one in front of him all disassembled, and it went through the entire engine and how it's configured in that video, so go check that out. But they are just crazily over-engineered for what they are. I mean, this is a 90s box, for word of a better, you know, for better of a phrase. It's an economy car. That's what it is. It is an economy car. It was made to be an economy car. It's front-wheel drive, manual, basic, but they still, from the ground up, over-engineered the car. I don't know of any other front-wheel drive small cars these days, none actually, that have double wishbone suspension all round, all four corners. Came with optional extra alloy wheels and low-profile tyres in the early 90s, you know, and I think Honda was one of the first manufacturers to offer alloy wheels with low-profile tyres. And over-engineered their engines and gearboxes so that they could put up with power outputs well over what you would expect from a naturally aspirated engine to be able to cope with. It was like they made them to be turboed. It was like they made them to be modified, and they certainly made them to be revved out. So that's the second point, is that they're over-engineered, and with that comes the reliability that they have and the tunability that they have. When I was looking at cars as well, I was also looking at things like, you know, the MX-5, not practical. I was looking at BMWs. They're just too big of a car and not as fun of a car in my opinion because of the weight of them and the size of them. And yeah, you can strip a load of weight out of them and stuff like that, and don't get me wrong, like that's definitely something that I want to do with this car before I say it's done and completed. I won't be ripping everything out, it'll be very tastefully done. Stay tuned if you want to watch that. But I just think that BMWs are either underpowered or you have to spend a hell of a lot of money to make them, you know, overpowered. And there's nothing really in between as far as like making them smart and stylish, but at a cheap price. If you make a BMW look good, it normally costs a lot of money. If you want to make a BMW very quick, you can do the basics quite well. You know, you can make them into a nice drift car, naturally aspirated drift car, weld the rear diff, all that sort of stuff, and they will do that brilliantly. But I'm not as much into sliding as I am grip. So that's the third thing, as boring as that is. It's practical and it fits. And then you've got other cars that are as practical, as sporty, as fun, like the Fiesta ST for example, but a new Fiesta ST had set you back probably 4 times what this is worth. You know, I paid $2,000 for this, and I think Fiesta STs these days are knocking around for about 6 to 8 grand for a nice one. This has got just over 75,000 miles on the clock, and it's an EM1, a bog standard at the time EM1 when I bought it. So for $2,000 I got it at an absolute steal, and it's because it's so modifiable like a Fiesta ST, but cheap unlike a Fiesta ST. So modifiable and fun like a Mazda MX-5, but practical unlike a Mazda MX-5 or a Miata. And it's for all those sort of reasons. So the fourth point being that it's cheap. It's for all those reasons that I chose the Honda Civic. So we've got that it's over-engineered, we've got that it's reliable, we've got that it's, you know, cheap, we've got that it's well modifiable, and with all that in its little container, if you like, with the nostalgia, I knew that I had to get a Civic. I had to get another one to put me on. While I found a donor shell for the red one, I found a donor shell pretty quickly for the red one, and now I need to restore it and get all the stuff out of the red one into the white one, and then I need to finish this as well while I'm doing that, because I'm really enjoying like modifying this in an aesthetic sort of way and in a really budget friendly sort of way. And I've obviously got over 30 videos if you want to check that out, but that's why I chose this car and bought another Civic on top of the one that I already had and on top of the shell that I'd bought to swap everything out of that one into it. That's why I bought a third Civic to put me on. And with that sort of package, if you like, me and the nostalgia that I feel with the car, and for all the points that I've mentioned, these cars have so much potential, and that's why I chose the EG Civic initially before I got this as a third Civic. You know, the potential of these cars is ridiculous, and you only have to look at things like time attack. Not even in their own classifications are Civics, you know, dominating, but they also dominate open class. You see the Honda Civic's front wheel drive with 700 horsepower going through the front wheels with massive aero all over them, ground effects, you name it, and they dominate open class. They're dominating cars like R34 GTRs, Evo 9s, Subaru Imprezas, and they are up there and in most cases beating that competition, that level of competition. I don't think it's because as a standard car they're better, because they're certainly not. I don't even think as a standard chassis they're better, because I think they're probably are on par, but I think the development, because of the popularity of these cars and the development in aftermarket support, and there are so many companies that offer off-the-shelf parts for this car to make it into a race car, whereas you'd probably have to spend a lot of money yourself engineering and developing things, you know, research, engineer, develop. It'd be a vicious cycle to get something that you can just buy off the shelf for a Honda Civic or for an MX-5. And they are the ultimate cars, in my opinion, for customization and modification options. And I think the next car that's going to be there, and is probably already there to be honest, as far as off the shelf options are concerned, is going to be the GT86 and BRZ chassis. And the fact that Toyota, by the look of it, and Subaru by the look of it, are using the same chassis again, I think that will only encourage the aftermarket support for those cars. So it's certainly certainly not a guessing game what car I'd like to move into next because of that aftermarket support that will be there. I'd love to get a BRZ or a GT86, but first I need to finish these Civics and build these Civics. So that's why I bought a Honda Civic. The nostalgia far outweighed a lot of the other choices, but I think when you start comparing the car that you want to get, especially in this sort of world where you want to modify cars, Civics, MX-5s, GT86s, BRZs, those are the cars that stand out by far. And then if you look at what's practical, what you need out of a car, you know, I needed rear seat space and things like that, the Civic just stands out, and I think it always will do for that reason. The current Honda Civic, the FK8 chassis, that's got trick suspension up front, and it just sort of, it's followed on from the footsteps of the predecessors, which this is the EM1 and the EG6 in front of me. So I hope that sort of answers a few questions as to why I'm absolutely mad about Hondas. You need to check out the video from Tuning Fork on how over-engineered the engines are, and that does go all the way back to like the engines designed in the 80s from the D16ZC engine, you know, the twin cam that's spoon-tuned, naturally aspirated, kept at 1.6 to over 220 horsepower. That was over 220 horsepower, revving to I think 11,000 RPM or something crazy. But yeah, definitely cool, reliable, ridiculously modifiable, cool cars. So I hope you enjoyed this particular video. I know it wasn't exactly a feature-packed episode like we normally do, but I just thought I'd give you a little bit of an insight as to why I chose the Honda Civic and why I think they're so cool. And maybe it'll help you answer the question of whether you should buy a Honda Civic or not. So I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.